Hey everybody, it's Ben Murphy with the Deuce Kirk team in Keller Williams in Greater Lexington. Today's video on living in Lexington, we're going to do another pros and cons of a neighboring community here in the Lexington area. We're going to talk about the state's capital of Frankfort, Kentucky. First pro right out of the gate, ladies and gentlemen. I think this is an easy one for anyone who's from Lexington or from Kentucky itself. You got to talk about the bourbon industry, and Frankfort is definitely a hot spot when it comes to bourbon distilleries. I mean, you've got the famous Buffalo Trace, Jim Beam's over there, and there's a couple of other ones that are out there. So Frankfort is definitely a hot spot when it comes to the bourbon industry. So if that's something that you're trying to get into, or if that's something that's interests you, Frankfort's not a bad spot to try to land. I will say, Buffalo Trace is a phenomenal spot here in Lexington, or not to say Lexington, Frankfort. That's actually where my wife and I got married. The grounds are absolutely gorgeous. It is a unique experience, and it's also a historic landmark. It has been registered as a National Historic Landmark, and when you go and you visit and you check it out and you do the tours, you understand completely. It's had a couple of different names over the course of its existence. Colonel Taylor is a bourbon that comes out of there that if you are a bourbon drinker, you've heard of it before. That was an original name, and it actually became Buffalo Trace in 1999. I'm going to give you a fun fact. The name comes from the fact that there are four main kind of roads that come through the area, and they were created by hundreds of thousands of buffalo who migrated through the area of Frankfort, and so that's why it's called Buffalo Trace. Like, there is a true meaning behind the name, and like I said, they do events throughout the year. There's a Christmas event that I'm going to try to go to with my wife. It's a kind of a light up, I think they're going to light up the whole distillery, hopefully, in Christmas lights. I'm sure it's going to be just absolutely cool to go watch it, but it's also one of those places where you go and you can just smell not necessarily the bourbon, but just kind of just smell the atmosphere of everything that's all the mixtures and the ingredients are brewing. It's a really, really cool area. So if you are traveling through Lexington, Frankfort area, it's definitely one of those bourbon distilleries you have to check out. And I guarantee you won't be disappointed. Before we continue, ladies and gentlemen, do me a favor, hit the like button. It's going to get those videos out there for everyone who's trying to research a little bit more information about Lexington, Frankfort itself. So thank you so much. Second pro, ladies and gentlemen, this is kind of a recurring theme when I do these different videos about the different areas here in the Lexington, and that's cost of living. It's one of those things that on a national average, cost of living here in the central Kentucky area is below average compared to the rest of the United States, and that is important when it comes to picking a location, to live and settle down and, buy a house. The average home price in Frankfort is in the 135 to 150 range, which is great if you're trying to find a decent home, because if you are qualified for $250,000, you're going to be living in a very, very nice house in the Frankfort area compared to trying to find a house here in the Lexington area where $250,000 it won't get you as much if you go just outside the county towards Franklin County where Frankfort is. And so just understanding that when you do your research, that cost of living it's going to be a little bit cheaper when you go live in Frankfort. One of the next pros that could be considered a con, depending on which way you lean in the course of a small town population size, Frankfort's not a huge capital. I know it's the capital of the state, but it's definitely not the biggest city in the state of Kentucky. It only registers at 27,000 residents, so it is a small town technically compared to Lexington, which has 300,000 plus people, and that's not even really including the University of Kentucky, which houses 30,000 students. So just know that if you're looking for a little bit more space, a little bit more not some craziness, the fact that Frankfort's the capital and it still only has 27,000 residents is pretty cool, depending on which way you look. And I don't know. I think it could be considered a pro, especially if you're trying to enjoy Lexington, but kind of be on the outskirts without all the craziness going on. Now, I've mentioned this before in previous videos when it talks about Lexington and you're not too far from the country. Well, like Frankfort, you're pretty much in the country. You're surrounded by it. Whereas Lexington, it might take you 20, 30 minutes to really get to country. In Frankfort, it's going to take you like 2 minutes to get to the country. I've looked at many farm properties in that area, helping previous clients who were searching for farm properties. Frankfort kept popping up. So if you're looking for that small town, looking for that country, central Kentucky bluegrass kind of feel, Frankfort's definitely an area that you're going to want to research more about. You're going to want to check out because it is beautiful country. It's very hilly. It's those rolling hills of central Kentucky. You definitely see that in the Frankfort area, and I just want to make sure that you all knew that farm possibilities are there, especially with it being lower cost of living. You definitely want to check out Frankfort. Final pro of the day, ladies and gentlemen, probably one of the unique pros of Frankfort is if you look on a map of where it sits, it's right almost in between the two biggest cities in the state of Kentucky, Louisville and Lexington. Okay, you can jump on 64 and you'll be in Lexington within 30 minutes possibly. You jump on the highway and you go the opposite direction towards Louisville. 45 minutes, you're in the biggest city in the state of Kentucky. And I think that is a pretty unique pro, especially for the fact if you're trying to enjoy both without having to live in the middle of all of it, Frankfort offers you that for sure. And so having that easy access, especially if you want to work in Louisville or you want to live in Lexington, you have that. I know a lot of our state workers and politicians who have to work in Frankfort, they don't actually live in Frankfort. They can drive into Frankfort because it's so close and it's so convenient to a good chunk of the central Kentucky area. So that's just something to think about when you, again, doing more research, understanding the location of Frankfort. You have that easy access to get to Lexington very, very quickly. I talk about this in my previous videos, ladies and gentlemen. If you watch the pros and cons of some of these other areas, it's something I have to talk about every single one of them because it affects every single area, and that's the weather. I will say the weather can be brutal, especially during the winter months. The coldest months of the year are definitely January and February. December's not too bad. You're definitely on that downhill path when it comes to the temperature. The weather's still kind of trying to figure itself out. Right now, we're in the middle of November. We just had a thunderstorm last night, but now it's 35 degrees the next day. So it's a little bit, I call our weather bipolar, just because you'll have 75 and sunny on Monday, 35 and snowing, or 32, whatever, and snowing by Thursday. And that's our weather. And especially in the November months, the March months, March, when it's going from cold to hot, I think it's definitely fluctuates much more than going from hot to cold. So just understand that in March, usually by that second week, we have one last true snowfall. Nothing sticks because the ground's too warm for it to stick, but we have one last really good snowfall going into that second week of March, and then by that fourth week of March, it's spring, and it's spring. But February, it's again, as you're going towards those warmer climates, the weather just gets very, very wacky. I will say we don't get tons and tons of snowfall like our neighbors to the north do. We definitely deal with ice a lot more than we deal with snow. So that's, kind of leads me into my next con, my second con, which I talk about traffic here in Frankfort. Traffic in Frankfort can be rough, especially with the infrastructure that was designed around it. It's similar to Lexington's. You do have a highway that kind of comes through Frankfort, kind of. It's a little bit more south of the actual city, town itself, but at least there is a highway that kind of comes right next to it. But once you're kind of going in there and driving in there, it's not the greatest. It's more just because of the rolling hills. And when you drive through it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It can be very, very hilly. So when you're dealing with the ice on top of the road conditions, it could be very, very rough for everyone who's coming through and living in Frankfort itself. So my second con, ladies and gentlemen, one thing that keeps kind of coming back to me, I called a lot of my former clients who live in Frankfort and people that I know that lived in Frankfort, grew up in Frankfort. If you are a young professional, young adult coming right out of college, entertainment-wise, there's not a lot going on. There really, really isn't. It's definitely more of that small town, settling down, you're married, you got kids, you just want to go to a safer community, a nicer community. Frankfurt's definitely leans more towards that. If you're looking for entertainment, nightlife, those kind of things, you're definitely going to have to drive to Lexington to find it. That's kind of similar to some of the surrounding areas that I've talked about before. Georgetown for sales, Winchester, similar issues, but if you're a young adult and you're looking for that constant entertainment, big city entertainment, you got to go to Lexington to find it, or you got to drive the opposite direction. You got to go to Louisville to find it, and that's just kind of a con to think about if you are first-time home buyer, not necessarily have a family yet. Just think about that. The third con, ladies and gentlemen, is something again that I have to touch base on every single video that I do about Central Kentucky. It's allergies. Allergies can be very, very rough if you're not used to it. If you're not used to this Kentucky weather that goes into the allergy season, I would just say be prepared for it. I've had clients move in from California and Canada and just were not ready for that. I mean, they've heard of allergies. They think they have allergies. But when the change of the seasons happens, I mean, it'll hit them and it'll just punch them straight in the mouth. So I would just say be prepared for it. Have medicine ready. Kind of have that mindset that you're coming into this. And, I think you'll be okay. But even with me, I live here most of my life. Every now and then it'll still catch me off guard. I'll be stuffed up, hard to breathe. My my voice will go away, especially if I'm still coaching. And so it's just part of the gloriness of living here in Central Kentucky. Now, when I was doing my research about Frankfort, I asked, again, my clients, I went online and I talked to different people about what lacks in the Frankfort area. And they talk about small businesses development of urban areas, and that kind of goes back into its small town kind of feel where it could be a con, that it is a small town. Frankfort, it is the capital of Kentucky, but it's very, very slow in growth. It's only grown in population size 1% over the last 5 years, whereas every other kind of city is in the 3 to 5% range. So just kind of know that when you're picking where to settle, where to find that first home or that next home, Frankfort is definitely on that smaller town feel. Is not that crazy at building and growing and expanding the way Lexington is and the way Louisville is. So just know that that's just kind of something that you're going to have to deal with. Hey, everybody, this isn't necessarily a con. It's just something I want to address for sure. It's something that has come up in previous videos that I do. When you do your research, you're going to go online. You're going to do some different neighborhood review sites. And one thing that keeps constantly coming up is it talks about crime in all the cities, and just about every city that I see, like they don't have good ratings. And that's just not in Kentucky. Like I started looking at reviews in surrounding states, and most cities, crime's got like a C or a D rating. So in all honesty, when it comes to crime, make sure you understand that cities, bigger populations, you're going to deal with crime at some sort of level, or you're going to at least see ratings where crime is prevalent. But at the same time, when I talk to family from out of town that's coming to visit, I know what areas of the city they don't need to go near, and I know what areas that they should definitely check out and hang out. And that's with every single city. So if you are interested in Frankfort and you do some research and you see on a website it's got a D rating or a C rating, or it's got some sort of rating talks about crime, that's part of it. Part of my job is to make sure that I guide you and find the areas that are safe, good for kids, good for singles, single women, single men, it doesn't matter. So just understand that when you do that, don't psych yourself out of looking at a certain city because one website says it's got a bad crime issue. So, I mean, every city does. You won't move to any city if you start looking at all the different crime statistics. But just know that as part of our job is where we know where the good areas and what the bad areas are, and we will help answer those questions for you. Don't want to just knock out Frankfort or Lexington or one of the surrounding areas just because a website says it's not safe. So just want to make sure I address that. Thank you. That wraps up the video, ladies and gentlemen. I do appreciate you if you stuck around for the very ending. It does help those who are researching just a little bit, learn a little bit more about the area, and that's why we put these videos out there. For everyone who's already liked the video, already subscribed to our channel, big shout out, big love to all of you. Do appreciate it. Things are rolling over here on the Deuce Kirk team side, so if you know anyone who's looking to buy a home, not just in Lexington, but if they're looking at Frankfort, Georgetown, Winchester, it doesn't matter. Let them know. We're here. Love to help you out. Love to give you out more information. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate you for all the support that you give us. If you know someone needs some help, leave us a comment, shoot me an email. We'll set up a free consultation. We'll do everything that we can to make that process easy. This is Ben Murphy with the Deuce Kirk team on Living in Lexington. Everybody, have a great day.